Chapter 1. You're not my cousin, are you? Jason adjusted the collar of his button-up shirt for the third time, muttering a curse at his GPS as his car rolled to a stop in front of a pristine suburban house nestled between two identical ones. Arrived, his phone chirped in a cheery voice. He stared out the windshield, skeptical. This was not what he expected. He double-checked the address on the invitation text his friend Layla had sent, number 412, Willow Grove Lane. He glanced at the painted numbers on the curb. 412. And yet there were no cars out front. No laughter spilling from an open door. Just a suspiciously tranquil house that looked like it had stepped straight out of a real estate brochure. Jason sighed. Whatever. It's probably just a small dinner party. She did say it was mostly family. He grabbed the bottle of wine from the passenger seat and got out. He had barely made it up the path when the front door opened. The man who stood in the doorway made Jason's brain short-circuit. He was tall, definitely over 6 feet, with rolled-up sleeves revealing a full sleeve of tattoos on one arm, and messy auburn curls that looked like they'd been finger-combed, not styled. His hazel eyes sparkled with mischief as they flicked from Jason's flushed face to the bottle in his hand. "You must be the guy," the man said with a crooked smile. Jason blinked. Yeah, that's me. The guy. Totally." The man stepped aside. "Come on in. They're just plating the food." Jason hesitated. There was no they visible inside, just warm lighting, the faint sound of jazz, and a ridiculously cozy-looking interior that screamed expensive taste with just enough clutter to feel lived in. Still, this was the address, and hot-tattooed stranger guy clearly knew someone was coming. He stepped in. The door closed behind him with a soft click. "I'm Ashton," the man said, walking toward the kitchen, casual and confident in a black t-shirt and jeans that fit a little too well. "Hope you're not allergic to lemon. I made pasta." Jason followed, awkwardly holding the wine like a shield. "Jason, and, lemon's great. You nervous?" Ashton grinned as he uncorked the wine with practiced ease. Jason froze. "Why would I be nervous? I mean, I get it," Ashton said as he handed Jason a glass. "Blind dates are always weird." Jason almost choked on his first sip. "Blind what now?" Ashton tilted his head. "Wait, you were the guy Jules set up with me, right? She said you'd be coming at 7. Jason's stomach flipped. "I was invited to a dinner party." They both paused, staring at each other. A slow horror crept into Jason's face. "What's the address of this house?" he asked carefully. 412 Willow Grove, Ashton said, frowning now. Jason yanked out his phone and pulled up Layla's text. "Oh my God, she sent 412 Willow Grove Court. This is Lane." Ashton blinked, then burst out laughing. Jason groaned, burying his face in his hands. "I'm so sorry, I should have double-checked. I'm the idiot who just walked into a stranger's house and drank his wine." "You're not an idiot," Ashton said, still grinning. "You're just a very well-dressed lost man with terrible GPS luck." "I should go," Jason mumbled, setting the glass down. "The real party's probably still going." "Nope." Ashton gently pushed the wine glass back into his hand. "You already sat down. Leaving now would be rude." Jason looked up, startled. "I made enough for 2, Ashton added with a shrug. "Might as well stay for dinner, unless you're morally opposed to lemon chicken pasta made by a suspiciously handsome stranger." Jason let out a startled laugh. "You're very full of yourself." "I work in antiques. Confidence is half the business," Ashton said as he dished up the food. Despite the lingering awkwardness, Jason sat down at the table. The smell of lemon and herbs filled the space, warm and inviting. The meal was delicious, frustratingly so. As they ate, conversation started to flow naturally. Ashton was funny in a dry, self-aware kind of way. He asked questions that made Jason laugh more than he had in weeks. How does one become a freelance illustrator who specializes in cereal box mascots? Why was Jason once banned from a cat cafe? What kind of lunatic makes their Tinder bio a quote from The Princess Bride? Jason, for his part, learned that Ashton used to be a corporate lawyer before leaving it all to open a vintage store downtown. He restored jukeboxes in his free time. He once accidentally won a chili cook-off by mistaking cinnamon for cumin and refused to feel bad about it. Jason found himself relaxing. The embarrassment faded into something softer, like he'd stumbled into a warm pocket of serendipity. Ashton kept smiling at him with this amused glint in his eye, like Jason was the most unexpected thing that had happened to him all year, and he was absolutely delighted about it. They finished dinner with wine and a shared bowl of mango sorbet, sitting on the living room floor because Ashton claimed couches were creativity killers. Biscuit, Ashton's golden retriever, wandered in and promptly dropped his head on Jason's thigh like he, too, had decided Jason was staying. Jason blinked down at the dog. He's trusting. He's a terrible judge of character, Ashton said lightly, then looked at Jason. Except maybe this time. Jason's face flushed. It was nearly midnight by the time Jason stood up with a stretch. Okay, this has been incredibly strange, and surprisingly nice. But I should probably head to the actual dinner party, apologize to Layla for ghosting her, and also maybe rethink my entire relationship with Google Maps. Ashton glanced at the clock. You really gonna go knocking on doors at midnight? Jason hesitated. Guest rooms down the hall, Ashton said casually, like offering strangers a place to sleep was a normal Tuesday. Clean sheets, door locks from the inside. Biscuit might sneak in, but he doesn't snore. Jason opened his mouth, closed it. He should say no. He should. But instead, he found himself saying, only until I figure out how far off course I really was. Ashton smiled, something warm flickering in his eyes. Fair deal. Jason followed him down the hall, head spinning. The guest room was simple, plush bed, a cozy chair by the window, and a stack of vintage National Geographic magazines. He set down his phone, toeing off his shoes, still trying to understand what exactly had just happened. In a house that wasn't meant for him, with a man he wasn't supposed to meet, Jason felt oddly welcomed. Safe. As he slipped beneath the covers, the soft hum of jazz still drifting from the living room, Jason whispered to himself with a crooked grin. This is either the beginning of a horror movie or the weirdest meet-cute of my life. From the hallway, Ashton called. Hey, Jason. Yeah? You're really not my cousin, right? Jason burst out laughing. Nope. Just your dinner date from a parallel universe, apparently. Ashton's voice was muffled, but unmistakably amused. Best wrong turn I've had in years. Jason stared at the ceiling, heart oddly full, smile lingering long after the lights went out. Chapter 2. There's a hot man making me pancakes, and I don't know if I'm still dreaming. The scent of banana and cinnamon drifted into Jason's dreams before reality caught up. He blinked awake, confused for a moment by the unfamiliar room, the cozy bed, the soft morning light streaming through sheer curtains, and the distant rhythmic sound of a spatula tapping a pan. He sat up slowly, ruffling his dark curls, and checked the clock on the wall. 8:43 a.m. A reasonable time to be awake, but an unreasonable time to have already smelled something so good. He padded to the door barefoot, half curious, half hypnotized by the smell of breakfast. The moment he stepped into the kitchen, he nearly tripped over Biscuit, who wagged his tail sleepily from the rug. And then, Jason froze. There, standing at the stove in nothing but a pair of joggers that clung far too comfortably to his hips, was Ashton. Shirtless, hair damp from a recent shower, tattoos trailing from his biceps to his ribs, flipping pancakes. Jason blinked. Once, twice. Ashton glanced over his shoulder and grinned. Morning, wrong address guy. Jason's voice caught in his throat. You make pancakes like this for everyone? No, but you looked like a pancake person. Ashton slid a golden brown circle onto a plate. Plus, I owed you for the wine. Jason rubbed the back of his neck. This feels like a very elaborate dream. Ashton poured more batter. If it were a dream, I wouldn't be using oat milk because I ran out of regular. So, welcome to real life. Slightly inconvenient, but still hot. Jason laughed despite himself and took a seat at the breakfast bar. Biscuit promptly rested his chin on Jason's foot like they'd known each other for years. Ashton placed a plate of pancakes in front of him, alongside a cup of black coffee. No sugar, Ashton said confidently. You seem like a guy who thinks adding sugar is cheating unless it's in dessert. Jason raised a brow. You got that from one dinner? I'm observant, Ashton said, stealing a bite of pancake off Jason's plate with his fingers. They ate in easy silence for a few minutes. Jason sipped his coffee, watching Ashton from beneath his lashes. There was something disarmingly real about him. The casual way he leaned on the counter, the way his eyes crinkled when he smiled. Can I ask you something? Ashton said after a moment, eyes narrowing thoughtfully. Sure. Why do you always look like you're halfway out the door? Jason blinked. What? Like, you laugh, you smile, But you're always bracing for the exit. It's like part of you's already gone. Jason stared into his coffee. Wow. Okay, that's creepy accurate for someone I met by accident less than 24 hours ago. I told you, I'm observant. Ashton's voice was soft now. You don't have to answer. No, it's fair, Jason said, setting the cup down. I guess I got used to people not sticking around, so I started assuming they won't. Ashton didn't respond right away. He just nodded slowly. Well, I'm here, and I make really good pancakes. Jason smiled, a little crookedly. You do. After breakfast, they cleaned up together. Jason found it strangely calming. Passing plates, wiping counters, the occasional bump of shoulders that felt less like an accident and more like something flirtatious in disguise. The rest of the morning passed in a quiet haze of weird domesticity. Ashton gave Jason a tour of the house, which turned out to be as unpredictable as its owner. The living room had a wall full of old vinyl records and a jukebox that worked, sort of. The hallway featured a shelf lined with strange knickknacks. A ceramic frog with a missing eye, a cracked snow globe of Paris, a framed photo of a younger Ashton with a mullet, which Jason could not stop laughing at. Every corner of the home felt curated, not to impress, but to tell stories. They spent hours in the sunlit den, Ashton sprawled on the couch reading some old fantasy novel, while Jason curled into the armchair sketching Biscuit, who posed like a regal beast before rolling off the rug with a loud snore. The illusion of this bubble lasted until early afternoon. That was when the front door burst open with all the subtlety of a marching band. Ash! Why is there an unfamiliar car in your driveway, and why does it smell like pancakes and man in here? Jason sat up as a whirlwind of a woman appeared in the hallway. She had curly brown hair piled into a messy bun, arms full of reusable grocery bags, and a chaotic energy that filled the room before she even opened her mouth again. Ashton? In here, Jules, Ashton called from the kitchen. Jules appeared in the doorway, narrowed eyes scanning Jason like a mom at a PTA meeting trying to guess which kid stole the cookies. Who's this? Jason stood awkwardly. Jason? Jason who? Jason who's not the guy your friend tried to set Ashton up with, Ashton supplied cheerfully, stepping between them with a bag of chips. Jules blinked. Wait, what? Ashton explained the GPS mishap in under a minute. Jason offered a sheepish wave when it was over. Jules stared at him, then at her brother, then back at Jason. Well, you're cute, she said finally, flopping onto the couch. Not the worst wrong turn. Jason's phone buzzed at that exact moment. Missed messages. Oh no, Ashton raised an eyebrow. That a jealous boyfriend? Jason snorted. Worse. Milo's my best friend, also my emergency contact, and possibly about to report me missing. He stepped out to the backyard and hit call. Milo picked up on the first ring. Where the hell are you? Jason winced and held the phone an inch away. I'm fine. I'm sorry. It's a long story. You never showed up last night. We were texting and then poof, radio silence. I thought you got kidnapped or decided to start a new life in Idaho. I kind of went to the wrong house, stayed for dinner, stayed the night. Long story. There was a pause. You what? Jason laughed. It's not like that. The guy's nice, really nice, too nice and hot and made me pancakes this morning. Another pause. Oh my God, Milo whispered. You're in love with a man you met by accident. This is how true crime podcasts start. Jason rolled his eyes. He's not a serial killer. Blink twice if you're being held hostage. Goodbye, Milo. Jason hung up and turned right into Ashton. Everything okay? Yep. Just my best friend having a mild aneurysm. Standard stuff. Ashton smirked. You were laughing. Yeah, Jason admitted. I guess I was. They stood there in the sun for a moment before Ashton glanced toward the yard. So, I have a proposition. Jason raised a brow. I've got this backyard party coming up in 2 days. Trying to fix up the fire pit, make it not look like a death trap. You, my friend, have no plans for the next 48 hours. Don't deny it. Jason folded his arms. Are you trying to bribe me into manual labor? I'm offering you an experience. Pancakes, dogs, power tools. Jason hesitated. He should go home. He had emails to respond to, commissions half finished, and at least one laundry pile threatening to become sentient. But Ashton was watching him with that same lopsided grin, arms crossed over his toned chest, like this was all a bit of mischief waiting to happen. Jason sighed dramatically. Fine. But only because your pancakes deserve a Michelin star. Ashton grinned. Deal. Jason followed him back inside, heart unexpectedly light. He wasn't supposed to be here, but for once that felt exactly right. Chapter 3. If this is a fever dream, don't wake me up. The sun beat down just gently enough to make the morning feel golden instead of exhausting. Jason squinted up at the backyard, which was more jungle with ambition than anything close to manicured. The fire pit was definitely a hazard, a ring of scorched bricks, half collapsed into a pile of regret. I feel like this fire pit has seen crimes, Jason muttered, hands on his hips. Ashton, kneeling beside the busted stonework, glanced up. That's because it has. Mostly burnt marshmallows and questionable mulled wine. But yeah, crimes. Biscuit, in his usual sunny chaos, bounded past Jason with a half-chewed tennis ball and slammed into a folding lawn chair, knocking it over. He wagged his tail proudly, as though destruction was a form of affection. Jason laughed. Does he ever walk anywhere? No, he only gallops, crashes, or belly flops. He's a very binary dog. They worked for over an hour, hauling out crumbling bricks, repositioning the metal base, building something that looked more like a circle and less like a forgotten altar to misadventure. The flirtation between them had shifted from playful to charged. Charged, but still light. Still full of space to breathe. At one point, Jason bent over to lift a pail of gravel and lost his footing, stumbling directly into Ashton's arms. "Oh God, sorry," he muttered, gripping Ashton's biceps automatically. "Hey," Ashton said, one eyebrow raised, not letting go. "If you wanted to fall into my arms dramatically, you could have just said so." Jason rolled his eyes. "Shut up." But he didn't move away, and neither did Ashton. Their eyes met, Jason's dark and always a little skeptical, Ashton's hazel and too open, like windows without screens. They stood like that for a heartbeat too long before Biscuit crashed between them, demanding attention and managing to get both of them covered in slobber. "I think I've been claimed," Jason said, laughing breathlessly. "You have," Ashton said, brushing gravel off his jeans. "By the dog, and probably me a little." Jason didn't answer, but he smiled, quiet, unsettled, because this was getting easy. Too easy. They took a break on the back porch, legs stretched out across the same lounge chair, shoulders bumping as Biscuit dozed beside them. Ashton passed Jason a lemonade and a look that made Jason's ears feel too warm. "You ever have a day that feels like it shouldn't be allowed to be this good?" Ashton asked suddenly. Jason looked at him sideways. "Like it's too good?" "Yeah, like a fever dream. And you keep waiting for the cold water to wake you up." Jason hesitated. "Yeah, I've had one of those. About 10 hours ago, when you handed me pancakes shirtless." Ashton smirked. "Pancake seduction. It's my specialty." Jason snorted. "You're a menace." "I'm a charming menace." The conversation drifted from there. Over grilled sandwiches and shade under the lemon tree, the air between them shifted again. Not heavier, just closer. More intimate. The way they talked stopped being about what was happening around them and started to turn inward. Ashton shared how he'd once spent years clawing his way through the ranks of a high-powered law firm, only to wake up one morning and realize he hated everything about the person he was becoming. "I was good at it," Ashton said. "Good enough to be dangerous. But it was all ego and caffeine and no soul. One day I walked out mid-trial and never went back." Jason listened quietly. "And now you run a shop that smells like old books and vinyl and has an emotional support dog." "Exactly," Ashton said with a grin. "And make pancakes for strange men who show up at the wrong address." Jason hesitated, then said, voice lower, "I used to think I'd have my own studio by now. A big space, team of designers, clients who didn't pay me in exposure and weird promises. But I got burned by someone who told me I wasn't good enough to get there. And I think I started believing it." Ashton's expression softened. "Your ex?" Jason nodded, staring at his hands. "He said I was talented but didn't have follow-through, that I was charming but directionless. And I hate that part of me still listens to that voice." Ashton didn't say anything for a moment. He just reached over, took Jason's hand, and squeezed it. "Well, I don't know him. But I do know this. Anyone who gets you to laugh the way you laugh at Biscuit tripping over his own ears definitely has direction. He's just walking sideways, and that's fine." Jason blinked. Then, before he could think too hard about it, he leaned in and kissed Ashton. It was soft, not tentative, just genuine. A little surprised, but sure in the way two puzzle pieces click when you weren't sure they'd fit. Ashton made a pleased sound, hand lifting to the back of Jason's neck, fingers brushing his hairline. The kiss deepened briefly, just enough to leave Jason a little breathless. When they pulled apart, Jason blinked. Okay, that was. Better than pancakes? Ashton asked, lips still close. Dangerously close, Jason said, grinning. The day melted into a late afternoon of laughter, sunburnt forearms, and Jason sketching Ashton in the hammock when he thought he wasn't looking. Ashton caught him and teased him mercilessly. By dusk, the fire pit was complete. They lit it with a single match and cracked open a bottle of wine, sitting in mismatched outdoor chairs under a canopy of string lights Ashton had strung across the yard. The stars crept out slowly, one by one, and the wine made Jason loose-limbed and warm. You know, Ashton said, watching the flames, this might be my favorite weird thing that's ever happened to me. Jason turned to look at him. What? Randomly adopting a stranger with GPS issues? Yep, top 5 life decisions. Right after getting Biscuit and leaving Law behind. Jason nudged his knee against Ashton's. You're really okay with me still being here? You know, I'd be okay if you stayed another week, Ashton said simply. Or a month, or longer. Jason's heart stuttered. Careful, I might actually take you up on that. Ashton turned toward him fully now, eyes searching. Would that be so bad? Jason swallowed. His heart felt like it had climbed into his throat, but instead of answering, he leaned in. This kiss was different. Slower, longer, more intense. Ashton pulled him closer by the waist. Jason let his hands roam up Ashton's chest, along the curve of his shoulder. The chair creaked. Their wineglasses tipped, forgotten. There was a hushed giggle between kisses, Jason's, and then a breathless moan, Ashton's. Heat bloomed between them, fingers tangling in hair and fabric. But when Jason's hands slipped beneath Ashton's shirt, Ashton stilled him. Wait, Ashton whispered, forehead pressed to Jason's. Not like this. Jason paused, confused but not hurt. Why not? Because I don't want this to be a one-time thing we pretend didn't matter. Jason pulled back slightly. Who said I'd pretend? Ashton smiled, cupping Jason's cheek. I want the whole weird ride. Not just tonight. All of it. You. Me. Whatever this is. Jason's heart cracked open in a slow, aching way. Okay, he said softly. They didn't kiss again. Not yet. Instead, they stayed outside, curled up under an old blanket, sipping the last of the wine and watching the fire turn to embers. Later, inside the house, Ashton opened the bedroom door and said, Guest room or mine? Jason didn't hesitate. He walked past Ashton and crawled into the bed like he belonged there. Ashton joined him, their legs tangling naturally, Biscuit huffing as he flopped down at the foot of the bed. Jason turned off the light. In the dark, with Ashton's breath slow and even beside him, he whispered, If this is a fever dream. A hand found his under the covers, fingers intertwined. Don't wake me up. Chapter 4. You're the wrong address, but you feel like home. By the end of the week, Jason had forgotten what his apartment even looked like. He knew he should have gone back at some point to water the neglected potted plant on his windowsill, to at least check his mail, but the gravity of Ashton's house had pulled him in and refused to let go, and truthfully, he hadn't fought it. Instead, they slipped into something so domestic, it almost made Jason laugh when he realized how absurdly normal everything felt. Grocery shopping together became their new sport. Jason, the list wielder, Ashton, the chaotic impulse buyer. One morning, Ashton snuck 3 tubs of cookie dough ice cream into the cart. Jason pretended not to notice, until Ashton whispered at checkout, It's not technically cheating if I eat them before dinner. At home, they cooked side by side, hips bumping, spatulas clashing, Biscuit stationed between them like a furry sous chef ready to pounce on any dropped ingredient. Music played constantly. Ashton had a thing for jazz with silly names and old French ballads, and sometimes Jason would hum along under his breath while stirring sauces. In the evenings, Jason would curl into a corner of the couch, sketchpad resting on one knee, while Ashton lounged with a book or scrolled on his tablet. They didn't always talk. They didn't need to. Ashton's presence was steady, his laughter never forced. It was the quiet company Jason hadn't realized he was starving for. One afternoon, Jason stepped into the sunlit den and froze. A print of one of his illustrations, an old one, personal, something he never posted online, sat framed on the wall above Ashton's record player. The colors were soft, the lines warm. It was a sketch of a man walking a dog down a winding street lined with paper lanterns. Jason stared at it for a long time. Then at Ashton, who had come up behind him with 2 mugs of tea. "You kept it," Jason murmured. Ashton handed him a cup. "You left your sketchbook open one night. I snapped a picture, printed it this morning." Jason blinked fast. "That's really thoughtful." Ashton sipped his tea. "You're really talented. I wanted something of yours here. Something that felt like you." Jason smiled, and if his eyes shone a little too much, neither of them said anything. But not all moments were soft and golden. It started with Jules. She dropped by unannounced, as she often did, carrying a tray of cinnamon rolls and gossip, like it was her divine right. When Jason stepped out to take a call, she slid into Ashton's seat at the kitchen table and leaned forward conspiratorially. "You're good for him," she said without preamble. Jason blinked. Thanks?" "No, seriously," she said. "You make him laugh. You don't treat him like he's broken. That's new." Jason tilted his head. "Broken?" Jules sighed, pulling apart a cinnamon roll. "After his last relationship crashed and burned, Ashton kinda shut down. He dated a little, super casually, but nothing stuck. The guy before you, the one I thought was showing up last week, I had to beg him to even consider it." Jason frowned. "What happened with his ex?" Jules hesitated. "It's not my story to tell, but it was bad. Manipulative, the whole 9 yards. Ashton stopped trusting his own instincts. I think he started thinking no one was safe to let in." Jason's stomach sank, the pieces falling into place. He'd sensed it. The way Ashton sometimes watched him with quiet awe. The way he waited for Jason to bolt, not out of fear, but out of experience. Before Jason could ask more, the front door opened. Milo stood there, arms crossed, sunglasses still on, and the disapproving energy of a man who had spent too many hours panicking. Jason's stomach twisted. "Oh no is right," Milo said, stepping in. "You've been ghosting me for 5 days. I drove here to make sure you're not in a cult." Jules raised her eyebrows. "Wow, you weren't kidding." Jason sighed. "Jules, meet Milo. Milo, this is Ashton's sister." Milo scanned the room like a crime scene investigator. "This is too perfect. It smells like cinnamon and man soap. That's suspicious." Jason pinched the bridge of his nose. "He's not love-bombing me, Milo." "You don't know that," Milo exclaimed. "He's hot. He cooks. You're sleeping in his house and petting his emotionally manipulative golden retriever." Biscuit barked indignantly from the hallway. "I chose to stay," Jason said, crossing his arms. "And yeah, it's fast. It's ridiculous. But it also feels more real than anything I've felt in a long time." Milo stared at him, the fight slowly leaking from his shoulders. "I just don't want to see you get crushed again," he said quietly. Jason's voice softened. "I know, but I'm okay. I promise." Milo left after an awkward round of apologies and a lot of biscuit slobber. Jules left soon after, winking at Jason like they shared a secret pact. By the time Jason settled into the couch that evening, he was exhausted. Ashton appeared beside him with a bowl of popcorn and 2 beers. "Rough day?" he asked. Jason leaned his head on Ashton's shoulder. "Emotional whiplash, but I'm good now." They watched a ridiculous reality show, laughed too hard, kissed during commercial breaks, and pretended things were simple. But simplicity is always borrowed. Jason's phone rang around midnight. He almost didn't answer. He was half asleep, Ashton's hand in his hair, Biscuit drooling on his feet. But something made him glance at the screen. Unknown number. Area code from out of state. He answered, a woman's voice on the other end. "Jason Hale, this is Caroline from Indigo Studios. We received your portfolio through the Illustration Guild and we'd love to offer you a full-time position. In-house. Long-term." Jason sat up. "Wait, what?" She explained, "A contract. Steady pay, creative freedom. Everything Jason had ever wanted, packaged in a perfect job. The catch? It was in Seattle. Far from Ashton. Far from this." "I'll email the details," she said. "But we'd need a decision by Monday." Jason hung up in a daze. Ashton stirred beside him. "Everything okay?" Jason hesitated. "I got a job offer. Big one, out of state." There was a pause. "Oh." Ashton shifted away, just slightly. Not enough to hurt, but enough to notice. "Congrats." Jason turned. "You're not going to say anything else? What should I say?" Ashton asked, his voice too even. "It's your dream. I'm not going to ask you to throw that away. But I don't want you to stay because you feel obligated. I want you to stay because you want to." Jason opened his mouth, but Ashton was already standing. "I'm going to crash on the couch. Let you think." He left before Jason could respond. And the room suddenly felt too big. too quiet. Jason sat alone for a long time, staring at the soft flicker of the fireplace screen. His chest ached. Not because Ashton had pulled away, but because he hadn't tried to make it easier. Because he wanted Jason to choose. Later that night, Jason padded out to the living room. Ashton was curled on the couch, arm flung over his eyes, biscuit pressed against his knees. Jason crawled under the blanket beside him without a word. Curled into the curve of Ashton's body, face pressed into his shoulder. Ashton stirred. "Jason, I don't want to leave," Jason whispered. "Not yet." Ashton didn't respond. He just pulled Jason closer, and neither of them let go. Chapter 5. This is definitely not how GPS works. Jason woke to the feeling of fingertips tracing slow circles on his bare shoulder. Soft morning light filtered through the half-closed curtains, casting Ashton in a gold halo as he lay beside him, shirtless, tousled, eyes barely open, smiling like he knew he had no business being this devastatingly beautiful before coffee. "Morning," Ashton murmured, voice still heavy with sleep. Jason stretched, pressing a lazy kiss to Ashton's collarbone. "Is this the part where I wake up and realize I'm back in my own bed, alone, wondering what kind of fever dream makes someone fall in love with a guy who got lost?" Ashton chuckled, low and rough. "You're still here, and you're still annoying." Jason grinned and rolled on top of him, bracing his hands on either side of Ashton's head. "You liked it last night when I was annoying." "I stand by my statement," Ashton whispered, then pulled him down into a kiss. Their first full night together had been everything Jason didn't know he needed. Not rushed, not loud or messy. Just them, skin against skin, gasps between jokes, laughter threading through kisses, reverent touches and whispered words, and the occasional muffled moan when Biscuit, exiled to the living room, barked in protest at the locked bedroom door. They hadn't spoken about what it meant. They hadn't needed to. The morning was full of lazy affection. Ashton cooked breakfast in Jason's hoodie, which was far too small on him, and Jason made obscene noises just to be obnoxious. Biscuit whined dramatically until they shared scrambled eggs. The house smelled like maple syrup and heat. By the time Jules called, Jason had collapsed back into Ashton's bed, sketching something loose and dreamy in his pad while Ashton filed through vintage records nearby. "Family barbecue," Ashton announced after hanging up. "You're invited." Technically, she said, and I quote, "Bring your cute little GPS mistake or I'll steal him for myself." Jason groaned. "Why do I feel like I'm being adopted into a cult?" "Because you are, the cult of Jules. There's snacks." Jason agreed, despite the flutter of nerves in his stomach. Meeting Jules was one thing. Meeting the whole family, that was dangerous territory. That was real. The barbecue was held in Jules's massive backyard, where mismatched patio chairs surrounded picnic tables, kids ran screaming with water balloons, and an uncle with an intimidating beard grilled enough meat to feed a small village. Jason stood awkwardly by the drink table until Ashton appeared behind him and laced their fingers together. "Relax," he murmured. "You're with me." Ashton didn't let go of his hand, not when they greeted cousins, not when Jules shoved a beer into Jason's palm, not when an aunt pinched his cheek and said, "You're prettier than the last one." Jason didn't even ask what that meant. Somewhere between corn on the cob and a vicious game of charades, Jason started to feel welcome. Not just tolerated, but included, like he belonged there, under the string lights and laughter, with Ashton's hand brushing his lower back every time they passed each other. Milo showed up late, invited by Jules, apparently, and Jason stiffened. But when Milo saw him sitting on the grass with Biscuit on his lap and Ashton lying beside him, arms behind his head, he didn't speak. Not at first. Later, while Jason helped clean up, Milo came up beside him with a crumpled napkin and a guilty look. "Okay," he said. "I get it now." Jason raised an eyebrow. "Get we're happy. Really happy. And it's not just new fling glow, it's the real kind." Jason dried a plate. "I know it's fast." "It is," Milo said. "But it's also you, with him. And something about it makes sense. I was just scared someone else would break you. But he's different." Jason turned to him, softening. "Thanks for saying that." Milo squeezed his shoulder. "Just promise me you won't disappear into his flannel shirts and forget who you are." "I'll make sure he shares the flannel," Jason said with a smirk. By the time they got home, Jason was quiet, not withdrawn, just thoughtful. Ashton noticed immediately. "Hey," he said, handing Jason a glass of water. "You good?" Jason nodded slowly. Yeah, I've never been around people like that. A family that's so messy and loud and open. It's a lot. Ashton leaned on the kitchen counter. Want me to stop inviting you to things that involve potato salad and unsolicited hugs? Jason looked up. No, I want to keep being invited. Ashton smiled, walking over to wrap his arms around Jason's waist. You can always leave, you know. I won't chase you, I won't guilt you. But if you stay... He kissed Jason's temple. I'll make pancakes every Sunday, and I'll kiss you every Monday. That's the deal. Jason leaned into his chest. That's a good deal. They fell asleep that night, wrapped around each other, the weight of decision pressing gently on Jason's chest. He woke early, before Ashton, the soft morning light slipping through the window again. Biscuit snored gently by the door. The house was still. Jason rolled over, grabbed his phone off the nightstand, and stared at the notification that had been waiting for 3 days. Indigo Studios. Pending offer expires today. His thumb hovered over the screen. He imagined the other version of himself, living in a new city, chasing a new dream, building something stable and shiny. But then he looked over, at the man sleeping next to him, at the smile that lingered on Ashton's lips even in sleep, at the way his hand rested on the pillow, open and waiting. Jason didn't feel stuck. He felt found. He opened the email, typed 2 sentences, and hit send. Then he smiled, wide, free, and crawled back under the blanket, curling into Ashton's side like he was exactly where he was always meant to be. Chapter 6. I think the GPS brought me to you on purpose. It had been exactly 26 days, 17 grocery trips, 6 co-cooked dinners, 4 rounds of Jason getting tangled in Ashton's fitted sheets, and 1 spontaneous road trip to a flea market outside of town, where Jason had bought a ceramic duck that Ashton insisted was haunted. And now it was home. Jason had moved in slowly at first. Just a few drawers, a toothbrush, then a framed sketchbook page in Ashton's hallway. But at some point, the rest had followed. Clothes, his art tablet, the cursed duck, and finally, his heart. No ceremony, no conversation. He just started staying. Because he wanted to. Because it made sense. And Ashton had simply made space. Now the house had 2 coffee mugs on the counter every morning, 2 bodies in bed every night, and a shared calendar with things like buy more mint for Jason and Friday. Horrible rom-com night. Biscuit had stopped pretending to sleep in his own dog bed altogether. Jason had never known this kind of quiet joy before, like falling into something soft that held you back without needing to clutch too tightly. So when Jules suggested they throw a party to celebrate the glorious GPS mishap that doomed Jason to suburban bliss, they both said yes with mock groans and hidden smiles. The backyard sparkled with string lights again. The fire pit glowed warm and golden. Folding chairs lined the lawn, and mismatched tables were crowded with chips, sliders, mini cupcakes, and something Milo insisted was sangria but tasted suspiciously like regret. Jason stood by the cooler, drink in hand, watching Ashton mingle. Ashton was wearing a button-up shirt that Jason loved, the one that hugged his chest just enough and had sleeves rolled to his elbows. Biscuit trotted through the party in a small navy bow tie that had already been loosened from a wrestling match with one of Jules's kids. Hey, Milo said, appearing at Jason's side. So how's it feel being the most aggressively domestic man in the Western Hemisphere? Jason smiled into his drink. Weirdly, perfect. Thought so, Milo said. You look happy. Like, actually happy. Not pretending to be fine on video call happy. Jason bumped his shoulder. Thanks for being a pain in the ass until I admitted it. Anytime, Milo replied with a smirk. Also, can we talk about how this man somehow managed to throw you a party with gluten-free cornbread? I would marry him myself if you hadn't gotten there first. Across the yard, Ashton clinked a glass with a spoon. Speech time! Jason nearly spit out his drink. What? You've been living here for a month, Ashton said, walking over and pulling Jason up by the hand. It's tradition. I don't think that's true. Shh. Let it happen. Everyone fell quiet. Jason stood awkwardly in the center of the backyard, cheeks flushed, surrounded by family and friends and one very smug-looking golden retriever. So, he started, some of you already know this story, and for the rest of you, let me just say, never trust your GPS without double-checking the street and the suffix. Laughter. I was trying to go to a dinner party and ended up at Ashton's house instead. A total accident. I should have left. I really should have. But then he fed me lemon chicken pasta and didn't kick me out. And then he made pancakes. And then I kind of never left. Jason paused, eyes catching Ashton's in the glow of the firelight. Most of my life, I've felt like I've been on the verge of something, like I'm one wrong turn away from wrecking everything. But that night, that wrong turn was the first one that led me right. The crowd collectively melted. Jason glanced at the small box beside the speaker stand. Made something for Ashton. He lifted out a slim hardcover comic wrapped in brown craft paper, tied with twine. On the cover, a hand-drawn version of Biscuit sitting proudly beside a crooked fire pit. The title, sketched in Jason's signature line style, read, "The Wrong House." He handed it to Ashton, who looked down at it like it was made of stars. You made this?" Jason nodded. "Our story. All of it. Every weird, ridiculous, heartbreaking, heart-healing second. You have the first printed copy." Ashton didn't speak, just tugged Jason forward and kissed him, soft and slow and sure. The party whooped. Biscuit barked. Jules cried into a cupcake. Later that night, after everyone left and the backyard had returned to quiet, they stood under the lights, barefoot in the grass. Ashton wrapped his arms around Jason from behind, his chin hooked over Jason's shoulder. "You know," Ashton murmured. "I was scared." Jason tilted his head. "Of what?" "Of letting someone in again. Of building something only to lose it. But you didn't knock the walls down. You sat outside with pancakes until I let you in." Jason turned in his arms, hands finding Ashton's waist. "I don't plan on leaving." "You're the best wrong turn I've ever taken," Ashton whispered, brushing a kiss to Jason's forehead, then nose, then lips. Jason pulled him closer, their bodies pressed chest to chest. The kiss deepened. Hotter this time, slow and searching, like they had all the time in the world. They stumbled inside, laughter echoing down the hallway, hands tangled in shirts, fingers tugging at belt loops. Biscuit huffed from his blanket as clothes scattered along the floor in a trail of reckless joy. In the bedroom, the lights were low, the moon filtering in through the curtains. They kissed like they'd done it 1,000 times. Like they planned to do it 1,000 more. "I love you," Jason whispered, his breath ghosting across Ashton's collarbone. Ashton pulled him tighter. "I love you too." What followed wasn't rushed, wasn't fumbling. It was slow, sensual, messy in the most beautiful way. They laughed, moaned, whispered promises, kissed between sighs and soft gasps. No walls, no masks, just them, tangled in warmth and want and something so much deeper. Later, long after the world had quieted and their bodies had settled into stillness, Jason lay beside Ashton, his head rising and falling with the rhythm of Ashton's breathing. He traced lazy circles on Ashton's chest, listening to the soft exhale, the way Ashton mumbled in sleep, reaching for him even unconscious. And Jason smiled, not because of the party, or the comic, or the new life they were building, but because of this exact moment, this warmth, this peace, this love. Maybe love is just a glitch in the system that finally gets everything right.